Whitehorse Historical Society presents Being a Kid in the 50s, or alternatively, go out and play but be home in time for tea. The 1950s was the era of the post-war baby boom, and streets were filled with kids. Families with 4 or 5 children were the norm, and most mothers did not work outside the home. Kids were left to roam free through streets and backyards and often spent hours away from home riding their bikes and playing in the street with their friends. Before mobile phones, electronic gadgets and the internet, kids growing up in the 1950s had to be masters of making their own fun, as they had far fewer toys to play with than kids of today. Using just a simple piece of chalk, the footpath became the arena for friendly hopscotch tournaments. What can you do with 2 tin cans and a piece of string? Make a telephone, of course. Finish talking? Just turn them into a pair of stilts. But watch out for sprained ankles. Knucklebones came free from the Sunday roast. Sheep's knucklebones were the most common type used in Australia during the first half of the 20th century, and children would colour them by boiling them in water with ink or dye. During the 1950s, mass-produced plastic knucklebones became available. Elastics is a game where children take turns jumping over elastics stretched between 2 other children's legs, chanting various rhymes, including the popular one, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, inside, outside, puppy dogs' tails. A favourite pastime for boys was marbles, but girls also played. Marbles were either bought with pocket money or won by playing keeps. Marbles came in many colours with names such as cat's eyes, milkies, clearies, steelies and bloodstones. The big marbles were called tombolas. Old tyres were portals to hours of fun. Tied to a tree in the backyard, an old tyre made a very effective swing for Chris, whilst Brian and his brothers used old tyres for bowling along the road or racing down a hill. The 1950s was a time before anyone had heard of political correctness. Kids happily played cowboys and Indians, and playing with toy guns was the norm. Radio shows like Hopalong Cassidy and Smokey Dawson were played out in the streets complete with costumes and toy guns by both boys and girls. When Hopalong Cassidy, actor William Boyd, visited Melbourne in 1954 to appear on the 3AW Bunkhouse show, some 15,000 people turned up to the event, which only had a seating capacity for 5,000. And several children were injured in the crush and the event had to be called off. The roads were not as crowded in the 1950s, and the street was a favourite place for the neighbourhood kids. Just get your mates together and a box for a wicket and game was underway. Vicky remembers, I was one of only 2 girls in the street, so I was sent to the outfield and sometimes was allowed to bat. Families often took a set of wickets to the beach to facilitate a game of beach cricket. The backyard was not only a place for Mum to hang her washing on the Hills hoist and for Dad to grow his veggies, but an endless source of fun for kids. Kids loved swinging on the Hills hoist, but only if Mum was not watching. Dad can be seen working to clear the ground for a veggie patch, with young Chris helping. Children played in the backyard often with homemade toys, such as the trailer Richard is using on his trike to give his brother a ride. The handmade pushcart was very useful for giving younger kids a ride around the garden. On hot days, the backyard became a makeshift water park. Some kids had paddling pools, but everyone could cool off under the sprinkler or enjoy an ice block. The backyard also made a great place for a jam sandwich picnic with your siblings, followed by a game of quoits. It is interesting to note that quoits are one of the old-fashioned games that are featured at Schwerkold Cottage Heritage Family Day and are also part of the games for children who visit Schwerkold Cottage on a school excursion. Whenever one of the kids in the street had a birthday, there would be a party. Parties were simpler in the 50s, with raspberry cordial to drink, little cakes in patty pans, chocolate crackles, fairy bread with hundreds and thousands, and of course a birthday cake with candles to blow out. The savoury offerings were usually sausage rolls and cocktail frankfurters, both with tomato sauce, of course. It was not all fun. There were also chores to be done. While Brian remembers bringing in the wood for the stove and cutting kindling, other chores kids had to do often depended on location and gender. For those living in outer suburbia like Nunawading Shire, there were chooks to feed and eggs to collect. Mowing the lawn with the hand mower was also a task for the bigger boys. Helping with the dishes, setting and clearing the table were the more girly jobs. Every little girl had a favourite dolly. Dolls were the favourite toy for most girls. From walking dolls to bride dolls and baby dolls, each little girl had a favourite. And dolls' prams were a must-have accessory. When there were no friends or siblings around, Dolly was always there to share a tea party, and you could even ask your teddy bear. Whitehorse Historical Society has two very different dolls from the 1950s in the collection. The doll in the red dress is a celluloid sleeping doll with jointed arms and legs. The doll was made by Moldex Limited and the type of doll is Bonnie Babe. The second doll was made in Canada by the Regal Toy Company and is a First Nations doll and is the type of toy that was often brought back from overseas as a souvenir. Reading was a favourite pastime in the 50s. Ask any baby boomer what they read as a child and the answer is likely to be either Biggles by W.E. Johns or The Famous Five, The Secret Seven and The Magic Faraway Tree, all by Enid Blyton. There were 29 Biggles books released during the 1950s, one of which was Biggles in Australia. Enid Blyton wrote 9 Famous Five books and 10 Secret Seven books during the 1950s. Books were expensive, so children only owned a few. An excursion to the library was a highlight, as kids often had to rely on the library to read the next book in the series, like The Famous Five. Imagine the excitement if the next book in the series was on the shelf. The photo is of Box Hill Library, which was formerly used by the RSL and then taken over by the Council in 1951 and used as a library until 1971. Board games were very popular in the 1950s, and instead of sitting down in front of the TV, families would plan entire evenings around board games. Family board game night wasn't a joke. It was what people did for fun. The beetle game was mainly played among children, whereas Chinese checkers, snakes and ladders, and especially Monopoly, were played by all the family. Test Match was a very popular game and was made in Australia by John Sands. Swap cards were collected mainly by girls, and the craze took off when Coles stores commenced selling exclusive Coles cards to their customers. Woolworths stores also commenced selling Woolworths cards. Shell petrol stations followed suit with their particular brand. Swap cards were also sold through local newsagents, and as the craze grew more and more, decks of cards were raided, and jokers and extra cards were commandeered by children of all ages. Many female baby boomers can remember sitting in a doorway with a big bundle of cards, swapping 2 for 1 with a girlfriend. Jigsaw puzzles were another way to while away hours at a time and were very popular with all the family. With a range of different sized pieces, there was a puzzle that everybody could enjoy. Whilst the majority of comics originated from United States of America, there were some favourite Australian comics. Ginger Meggs was created by Australian comic artist Jimmy Banks, and the lesser-known Silver Flash and his Frogmen was created by Australian comic artist Virgil Riley. Comics were one of the things bought with pocket money and were often swapped with other kids. Pre-TV, radio, or wireless as it was more commonly called, provided a major source of entertainment for kids when they came home from school and on Saturday mornings. Young children listened to the Children's Hour and became members of the Argonauts Club. Older kids listened to serials such as Biggles, Tarzan, Hopalong Cassidy and Hop Harrigan. Guy Fawkes Night was a pretty big event for kids in the 50s. Any available pocket money would be spent on penny bangers, jumping jacks, throwdowns and the more expensive Catherine wheels and skyrockets. People would collect anything that was ready to be burned and throw it on the neighbourhood bonfire. Somebody would make a guy, dress him in old clothes, and he would sit on top of the pile. Once the sun went down, the bonfire would be lit and kids would be running around, letting off crackers, lighting skyrockets and having a lot of fun. One sentence, "Good evening and welcome to television," marked the commencement of regular television transmission in Australia on the 16th of September 1956 at Channel 9 in Sydney. In Melbourne, the first television station on air was HSV7, which started on the 4th of November 1956, only 18 days before the Melbourne Olympic Games. A new 17-inch or 43-centimetre television set cost over £200, which in today's terms would almost buy a new small car. Only 5% of Melbourne households had a TV set by the end of 1956. Many people watched television sets in shop windows or visited neighbours who were wealthy enough to afford their own set. The TV Week for 6th of February 1958 provides details of the type of shows that were available for children. ABC had Children's TV Club from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. HSV7 had kids shows starting at 5:15, with Young 7 followed at 6 by the Mickey Mouse Club. There was a break for a 7-minute news and weather at 6:53, kids programming returning at 7 with Annie Oakley and then Disneyland at 7:30. GTV9 kids programming was the Tarrax Happy Show that started at 5:15, followed by Popeye Theatre at 6:15. News was 6:36 to 7. 6:36 to 7. Then Roy Rogers. The Tarrax Happy Show featured Melbourne ventriloquist Ron Blaskett and his mischievous doll Jerry G, who was named for GTV9. Whitehorse Historical Society hopes you enjoyed this look back at being a kid in the 50s. And if you'd like to learn more, please take a look at our other presentation, 1950s School and Other Activities.